Hi, this is Andy from ArcGIS.net. This is the second in a series of video tutorials where I'm trying to teach users about the basics of Esri's ArcGIS Pro. Today we're going to look at some simple functions, and we're going to look at how to load some map data into ArcGIS Pro and some of the things that you can do with it. And the first thing that we're going to do is to download some data. So here's some that I've prepared earlier. This is on Esri's ArcGIS Hub, and this allows you to download some curated data. It's all pretty good quality, and then you can use this data with your GIS system. Now, when you look at this to start off with, you might think this is, a little bit beyond me. It's actually relatively simple. It's just getting into a new way of thinking about things. So all this does is tell you about the type of data that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be looking at, for each country of the world, this is data on life expectancy. So we've got male, female, average life expectancy in number of years for each country. And I like using data like this because it's pretty visual and it lets people get their head around GIS relatively quickly. So I'll put the link up on my site on upskillgis.net, but you need to load this page up, go to download, and you'll see there are a number of download options. And what we're interested in is one of the fundamental building blocks of Esri's ArcGIS Pro, or indeed the older version, ArcGIS Desktop, and that is a shape file. Okay. A KML file is what you would use if you were trying to put this data some way into Google Maps, but we're interested in using ArcGIS Pro, so we need to download the shape file. So if you click on that, you'll see that it will download for you, and if I just minimize this window, I've already got one sitting here on my desktop. Okay, now when I teach this kind of thing to my undergraduates, one of the things that I'm stunned by is the general lack of basic IT skills, particularly with Windows and PC based machines. And one of the things that I ask is, what does this mean, where it has a zip down the folder? And a lot of my students can't tell me. Well, simply means that the folder is compressed and it needs unzipping or expanding in order for us to be able to work with the data within. It's best not to try to work with zip files directly when you're using ArcGIS Pro, because things can go quite wrong if you're not experienced. So to unzip it, we've got a couple of options. We could use something called 7-zip, which is a fairly standard unzipper that you have to download as an additional program, or you can click extract all, and that will use the Windows unzipper. And I'll just close that for a moment, and I'll put them side by side so you can see that's the zip version, this is the unzipped version. And I'm just going to leave it on the desktop for the time being, and then I'm going to go to the ArcGIS Pro shortcut that I put on in the last video tutorial onto my desktop, and it comes up with this splash screen here. Now, you'll remember I spoke about licensing last time, so you can be licensed as a named user, or you can be licensed with an actual license code that's been issued by Esri. Now I'm using a license code, but I'm still logged in as myself up here in the top right hand corner. Now I've blanked that out because it's sort of got some personal details on there that you don't need to see. But if you click on map, okay, now this is defaulting to my OneDrive as a location, which is where I keep all my projects. Now what I will do is, in a later video, I will show you how you can do the same. And the advantage to this is that you can go onto another PC somewhere, and as long as you can connect to the internet, you can connect to your OneDrive and you can pull your data anywhere where you might be. So don't get too stressed about that at the moment. We're going to talk about that shortly. So I'm just going to call this ArcGIS _2 because it's the second tutorial, and as I'm a kind of child of the 80s, we used underscores a lot because you couldn't really do much else when you were using MS-DOS, but that's another story. Okie dokie. Now I did show you this last time, and this is the default map that I receive. Okay, now it points to the beautiful UK because that's where I'm located, and somewhere in the system there's location pointers to say that I'm in the UK, and this is the default map that it comes up with. Now this map is what you would refer to as a background map, and it says here it's topographic. Now I can take it off, and if you were using the old Esri ArcGIS desktop, this is what you would be faced with, pretty much a blank canvas. But Esri's made massive strides to make background mapping available to put your projects into a much better context. So we're going to leave it on there for the moment. I said this tutorial was about adding data, and that is exactly what I intend to do. So if we select on this top ribbon here, this is what this is referred to as a ribbon. If we select map, you'll see you get a list of icons that will make no sense to you at this moment in time. And even though there's been massive inroads with ArcGIS Pro to make it more intuitive, until you've got a little bit of basic understanding, a lot of these things will not be intuitive to you. But over the next few months, we're going to get to know how to use many of these commands and icons to sort out your GIS data and to complete GIS projects. So we're going to add data. Now here you will see where you can find the data. So I've left mine on my desktop, and I'm already in the desktop, and you can see that here is this shapefile. Now I will talk about the data structures and the files that make up a shapefile on another occasion, but as this is just an early demo, all I want you to do is just to understand that we've downloaded some data, okay, we've unzipped that data, and now here is the data that we're putting into the GIS. Now if your data doesn't appear in, and you've definitely got it in your location, hit that refresh button, because sometimes ArcGIS Pro is a little bit reluctant to show data that you've just downloaded, needs a bit of a prompt by hitting that refresh button. Frustrates the hell out of my undergraduate students, but it's just one of those things that we have to cope with. So I click on that, I click on OK, and look at that, we have a world map in front of us. And I can hear you saying, it's not that good, because I can get one of these world maps from Amazon or any other shop. Well, yeah, you can, but there's a slight difference between this map and the ones, paper maps you can buy in the shops, and I'll show you what that difference is as we go through the rest of this session. So, what do we need to know to help us understand ArcGIS Pro at this point? Well, one of the things is that we have a number of windows. This window here, or this pane on the left hand side, is called the contents pane. Sometimes it's referred to as the TOC, or the table of contents. So when you're looking at how to do something in Google, you'll often see this term TOC, and that's what it means, table of contents. And you can see that our data that we've downloaded, our life expectancy data per country, has been added as a layer. Okay, now we can turn those layers off. We get back to our standard topographic map. We can turn that off as well if we want to, and then we're left with nothing, but won't be a very interesting session. And then we can turn this back on. Now, if all has gone well, the map that has been added, the life expectancy map, should by and large overlap the same features on the topographic map. Okay, and there's a reason for that, which we'll come to in a second. Now, over here in this pane, you'll see it says geoprocessing. This is simply the last window that I used, but I can take that, I can delete that, and eventually I'll come to this thing called catalog, and we'll talk about catalog again in a future session. But essentially it's like Windows Explorer for ArcGIS with a few more functions. Okay, so if you look at maps and how they're designed, they tend to have sympathetic colours. So obviously having green land might not necessarily be the best colour, and we might want to be able to see what's underneath. So if we just click on that box here, we get a range of options. So some of these options don't have any boundary around them, so, and these are what are available in the standard Esri colour pack. I don't think I've downloaded any additional ones here. But if we, for example, clicked on orange, then the colour changes to orange. We've got some more different types of things we can colour it in with here. I like this buffer gradient. It's completely inappropriate for this map, but like it does look quite pretty. It does look quite striking. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this one, which is called a black outline, and all the outline does is it puts in the border around each individual country, but it leaves the actual colour, the shading, it leaves that to be clear. And it's already starting to make the map easier to understand and to interpret. Now, one of the really crucial things about GIS is understanding something about basic cartography. Now, if I right click on here and I go down this menu that won't mean a lot to you at this moment in time, but as you learn GIS you'll become intimately familiar with it, is if I click on properties, and you probably know what properties does. If you're in Word, for example, it's some information about the document. In ArcGIS Pro, it's no different. It's giving you information about the map layer. So what I'm interested in is if I go to source, okay, and then I go to spatial reference, this is some really important information because it's telling me that this map is in something called a geographic coordinate system called WGS84. And WGS84 stands for World Geodetic System 1984, and it's essentially a 3D model of the Earth that's in a 2D representation here on the map. But it's very important. WGS84 is widely used throughout GIS and cartography because it's a world standard. Yeah, you can base latitude and longitude around it, and everybody understands what WGS84 is because it's this world standard. Now we'll be using different coordinate systems and something called map projections as we go through the series of tutorials, but I just want you to understand how important that is, because if our data didn't line up when we're adding layers, sometimes it's because some of the data is in a different coordinate system, and that kind of can cause you issues. Okay, so what I also wanted to show you, and again this is absolutely crucial to understanding GIS, is something called the attribute table. And the attribute table is the database. The attribute table contains information that's associated with the spatial locations on the map. And again, this is where an understanding of GIS is won or lost, because if you can't grasp this concept, you're not going to get very far, unfortunately. So you do need to try to understand this, because it's a key component of geographic information systems, not just ArcGIS Pro, but any geographic information system. So if we again right click, it's the same menu that I looked at the properties, and I click on an attribute table or attribute table depending upon where you come from and how you speak. You'll see you've got some rows of data down here. Now I'm just going to pull these up. I'm going to make my map a little bit smaller, and I'm going to show you how to navigate around the map a little bit later, but just for the moment, yeah, take a look at this. And this is a typical attribute table for a shapefile. So you've got all these things here, FID, shape and object ID. These columns, they're system columns that you can't change very easily, and most cases you wouldn't want to. But the rest of the columns contain information or data on countries. So sovereign territory, type, name, long name, an abbreviation. Not sure what that must be the formal English name. This is the region of the world that the countries are located in. Interestingly, square miles, we tend to work in square kilometres in the UK, and then we have some numerical data, some more numerical data. Square miles is also numerical data. So you've got life expectancy, that's for both average life expectancy for male and female combined. This one is life expectancy of females. I know that because females invariably live longer than males. And this is life expectancy of males. So this is based on data from 1960 60 to 69, I think. I can't remember, but it's really interesting because you can look at the life expectancy in different areas of the world. It's here where an understanding of GIS is either won or lost. The key point to understand is the link between the map, between the spatial data, and the database that contains the attribute data. That's either numeric or non-numeric data that in some way describes or gives you some information about the particular spatial feature of interest. So, for example, if we take the country of Australia, apologies for my very poor Australian accent there. You got to have a laugh though, haven't you? Okay, so if we go here and if I click this grey column here, you will see that on the screen Australia has been highlighted. Now this turquoisey blue marking is when something has been selected and it matches the turquoise blue within the attribute table. And if we just take a little look at that, you'll see that life expectancy in Australia is pretty good. It's heading for 71 years. Ladies 74 and gentlemen are 668 years old. So it's this is the key point. It's just understanding that you have a spatial feature and then you have a set of data that is associated with that spatial features, and we have lots of spatial features together. They all go into the same table and we call that a database, or in the case of ArcGIS Pro and even ArcGIS Desktop, it's referred to as an attribute table. And we will be talking quite a bit about attribute tables and how you can add new points of data, how you can edit data, how you can do all kinds of things in a later tutorial. But just for now, just try to understand the relationship. It will make your understanding of GIS much easier as we progress through some of the tutorials. Okay, so I'm going to clear this selection. You should see that disappear, and it has done. And I'm going to try something a little bit more advanced, and that is using a function called select by attributes. And what I'm going to try to do is to identify countries based on particular features to do with life expectancy. So if I click up here on the top ribbon, and you'll see it says input rows, life expectancy by country, and that is the same as the title of the attribute table. I want it to make a new selection. I don't want it to add it to a previous selection or remove it from a selection. I want it to make a new selection, and I'm going to put in an expression. Now expressions are interesting. They are composed in a language called SQL, which is a database programming language, and they're very simple, and it's kind of like where something is something, do this. Okay, well, it's simple at this level. I guess it gets more complicated, as my database programmer friends keep telling me. So I want to try to find out where life expectancy is less than, and I'm going to go for 40. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this I'm going to run this expression, and hopefully it's going to select all the countries where life expectancy is less than 40. And you can see that there's a number of them that have been highlighted both in the database and on the actual map. Now this little trick here, if I press this, that just shows all the records that have been selected, and there's a lot of zeros in the data, and the zeros is where there is actually no data that's been previously collected. It's not that people don't live at all in these areas, it's just a very common way that sometimes you find that data's put into databases. It's either given a letter or it's given a random zero. Okay, so what I'm going to do is if I right click, I can sort descending. Okay, and this is now giving me all the actual data at the top and all the no data down at the bottom. So we can see that a lot of this life expectancy of less than 40 is in fact in African countries. That seems to be the majority of them, but we're going to check that in a moment. So the bottom one is Mali. So life expectancy of 28. That's not very good. Not very good at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear those. I'm going to go back to the full database, and I'm going to add another bit to this SQL expression, and I am going to say, and what I'm interested in is region is equal to Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so now the expression's saying, well, life expectancy is less than 40 and the region is equal to Sub-Saharan Africa. So it should pick out all those countries within Sub-Saharan Africa where the life expectancy is less than 40. So I'm going to run that. And I know that it's selected 74 records. So I'm going to click those, and you'll see that it's just given me the Africa countries. Yeah, so I've drilled down from the whole world to Sub-Saharan Africa using an expression for selection. And there's lots of things that we could do with this, but one of the really useful things is that if we right click and zoom to selection, I can make a layer from those selected features. I can turn off the original, and then I can, sorry, just trying to get that right, and I can say life expectancy less than 40 years in SSA, and the SSA means Sub-Saharan Africa. And then if I really wanted to, I could give it kind of red color like that, and you can see how you start to build up a map, because red is clearly the color of danger, and obviously if you're living in some of these countries, then chances are you're not going to live very long, so that's not really very good. Okay, well, that's all from this session. I hope you've followed me, and I hope you've managed to learn a little bit more about ArcGIS Pro. We'll be picking up some of the issues that we've touched upon in this session in the next set of tutorials as I compile them and I upload them to both upskillgis.net and my YouTube channel. Please swing by upskillgis.net, and I'll put the link in there for the data, and then you can try this for yourself. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch up with you soon.